Good evening, Sunday the 9th of August. Getting back into the swing of things after a bit of a slow week post-festival. I don't know if anyone's here, but what's the difference between a chickpea and a butter bean? You wouldn't pay $50 to have a butter bean on your face. Okay. I don't know, I just wanted to tell a joke. Don't hate me. Okay, so we'll start off just looking at the high time frame and our multi-month composite structure. Obviously, we traded into last year's 8-month composite lows and sort of held this as support, right? And very clearly, we are losing downside momentum on the high time frame, right? So we can clearly see that this is rounding out in much the same way that we lost upside momentum into sort of Q3, Q4 last year. So, this is clearly a rounding out process that we went through before topping out. And we're sort of seeing the inverse of that now into this area, right? We're just rounding out nicely into the sort of mid 55, 60K area. So, the question is, on that basis, how much lower are we going to go? I don't think we're going to go much lower, if at all. Given this rounding out that we're seeing, it's a bit of a bear market for ants, isn't it? Like we've only seen 55% drawdown. We haven't seen the sort of, oops, wrong one. We haven't seen the perfect storm of bad macro that we saw in 2022. Nonetheless, maturing market. Cyclical drawdowns are becoming markedly smaller. I mean, last cycle we drew down 60% within 6 months. Obviously, this time we're sort of 9 months into this bear, and we've only seen a 54% drawdown. So, we're certainly rounding out. It certainly seems to be in a bottoming process here. So the question is, how much lower do we go, or do we just, make a higher low perhaps and trade up from there? I mean, this is all academic stuff at the moment, but these are questions, that the high time frame is kind of posing. I think where we're trading right now is obviously an interesting area. 65 to 66K is the overlap between the value we printed in February and March and this more recent value that we've printed in June and July. And if we can obviously shift back above this area, we can potentially be looking for a move through this previous value up to the previous value highs. So we know that one of the most pertinent laws of market dynamics is that if price is able to re-enter previous value, it will attempt to traverse it, right? So at the moment, we're attempting to re-enter this value. If we can get within that, it's going to attempt to traverse that value. So, very quickly now, we start to sort of build out a thesis on the higher time frame in terms of a sort of interim upside target being this sort of 71, 72K area, which would just fill out this gap as well, right? So, that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. We also know that another possibility is that we could get interrupted at this high volume node at the point of control of the previous range. So we have that as an interim target as well, and that sits at 69K approximately. So there's our point of control, and there's our value high around 71.5, right? So this very quickly we're starting to build out a picture here of what we could anticipate over the coming weeks in terms of upside targets. We also have some confluence in the form of our weekly trend EMAs. So very quickly, if I just throw these on, just for completeness, EMA, I'll just grab triple EMA. Will that work for me? I don't know. Sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. 9, I want the week. I thought this is going to give me 3 EMAs, but it seems to be just one, which is curious. So a 21-week EMA. I'm on the same as chart here. Time frame 1 week. Triple EMA. This is curious, isn't it? I don't think that's correct. Maybe I've got another indicator I can use here. Here we go. Thank you, Mr. iMark. All right, this is better. Weekly. Okay, so we've got our 13 to 34 EMAs. That's fine for this purpose. Okay, so there's our weekly trend EMAs. It's been respected here. It's been respected here. We haven't yet traded into this area. Obviously, it's not hugely actionable as an area to look to trade around, because the difference between the 21 and the 34 EMAs is about 10%. So not actionable in that perspective, but it gives us confidence, at least in terms of the kind of regions we're trading into here, and when we could look to potentially flip our bias. So purely in terms of the high time frame composite structure, if we can get above the 65 to 66k region, we can look to target 71k, mindful of possible resistance around 69 being the point of control of this range, right? And that's really all there is to say for now. We're obviously trading at resistance. We could see a little bit more compression here on the sort of lower time frame to medium time frame, but broadly speaking, given the amount of time we're spending in this area, it's looking more likely to me that we're going to trade up. So I think it makes more sense to have a bullish bias towards 71k at the moment as things stand, until proven otherwise, right? So that's a sort of multi-month picture. We'll come and look at the sort of multi-week picture next. So let's do that. Okay, so really all this different in terms of the multi-week is that we've printed multiple weeks of value at the kind of upper part of our multi-month comp. So if our multi-month comp sits between here, we'll take it from the 1st of June and just draw this over and use the volume profile again. Right, so our multi-month composite low is at 61k. Our multi-month composite high obviously overlaps with this multi-week composite around 65, 66k, so same region. And I think the fact that we spent 5-6 weeks compressing here at the upper part of this range, to me signals that we are accepting, at the upper boundary of current value. So what does that mean? Well, if we can continue to accept here and compress against this level, we can anticipate a break higher. And obviously in that instance, potentially a backfill of this thin move throughout previous value. So the fact that we're compressing at this kind of value high and spending all this time up here, to me is bullish again. And therefore, I'm sort of leaning towards this being likely to break out to the upside as well, based on our sort of weekly values. So that's the weekly taken care of. And in terms of the sort of daily profile, all that we can really see here is that value is migrating higher, and that we spent a few days again at this upper extremity. So, 3-day composite formed here, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We can potentially look to use this sort of composite structure as we come into the new week. So we have 3 days of value over the weekend, inclusive of Friday. Maybe we get a pull back into the POC here at 65k, just filling out this imbalance. That might be the first place to look if we get a little flush. We're talking about pretty small moves, right? The volatility has been very low, but I think that again is a sign that we're potentially ready to break higher. So the first place I would look at if we get a small dip would be around 64.9. Be looking for this value kind of ideally to hold if we're going to trade up. Otherwise, be looking for potentially fresh longs higher. I'm currently long from earlier in the week, but we'll come into that in a minute. Okay, so that's the sort of daily view at the moment. There's not much to say here other than values are steadily migrating higher. Volatility is very low, and we have 3 days of balance over the weekend. So unless we can get a clean break higher, potentially we can see value lows again, or at the very least this sort of 3-day POC. Okay, so that's the sort of daily profile done, and now we'll come and have a look at VWAP. Okay, so in terms of VWAP, I think it's fair to say that the week has been obviously bullish. We've seen value migrate higher. We're trading above VWAP. We're trading imbalanced up on the developing week. So all looks reasonably healthy in terms of our developing week's VWAP. We're just finding resistance at previous month's value high. We know this is a big area of resistance, 65k, given we're at that composite high, the multi-week composite high, the multi-month composite high, and so on. So there's not really any news here. Nothing, it just adds a point of confluence to the composite structure we've already talked about. We want to see, I think we want to see our monthly VWAP hold on any retests, as it has done throughout this move up so far. But there's not really a great deal to say here in terms of the monthly. Quarterly hasn't really been, particularly well respected. In terms of the previous quarter's VWAP, so potentially we could talk about previous quarters val as an important level, but it hasn't been particularly well respected during this period, right? It's been chopped through over and over again, so it's not really a level I would pay much attention to. I think what is important, and again, it's just another point of confluence, is the fact that we're trading around 2024's VWAP, right? We haven't been able to get above that as of yet. So can we find acceptance through 66k? If so, I think that would again add a lot of weight to the probability that we traverse this previous value up towards that 71.5 area into potentially our developing years VWAP. And we are potentially seeing signs that we have successfully shifted back inside the developing years value, which again would point to a move up towards the developing years VWAP. So I think things are looking pretty constructive here on the developing year, given that we've shifted back inside yearly value, held yearly value low, and we're kind of seeing this compression at value highs, which would potentially lead to a move up towards that 71.5 area, which is the composite highs here aligning with yearly VWAP. So I think that's the way things are pointing to me. So I really don't see a reason to be bearish just based on VWAP and composite structure at the moment. I think things are looking quite encouraging. Okay, let's zoom in and look at this more closely. So this is a trade I'm in from last week. So obviously we printed 4 weeks of overlapping value here, which is now going to be a fifth. I was quite fortunate here. I was actually on my way back from a festival. I had to stop because I was exhausted for an emergency fast food meal. And as I was sitting there and just opened the chart, I noticed that we just had this attempt to break below the recent sort of multiple day composite, as well as this multiple week value low. So it was on that reclaim, it was a pretty straightforward long, failed breakdown. As it happened, we were also around quarterly val, so developing quarters value being respected, and back inside the previous month. So there were sort of two things that could have happened here, right? So one was we traded into our 4 week value highs here and rejected. We could have anticipated a move down to the 4 week composite low, but that played out. If that had broken convincingly, we could have seen continuation towards 61k. There was an attempt to break lower, it failed, right? What's the market trying to do? Is it doing a good job of it? Well, it's tried to break lower. It's doing a really bad job of it. I'm going to take the other side. And we traded up. We flipped the sort of 3 or 4 days of value that we printed from Friday into Monday, and just had this steady grind up throughout the week. So I took half off this long on Friday. We got this sort of reasonably big attempt to break higher, a bit of a retracement and a bullish retest, and we just continued to compress here over the weekend. So for me now, I'm really just taking a sort of Retardmaxxing approach in terms of my high time frame thesis is that we trade higher. I'm not too fussed about the 0.5 to 1% rotations that we're seeing in this little range, which is presumably pre-breakout before we see higher prices. And therefore, I'm just going to hold this long, right? I'm just going to hold this long. Potentially, I will look to add on dips once we are above 66k, because at that point, we've re-accepted within this previous value. And I have much more confidence in us trading higher from those areas before we, I don't think we're going to see, for example, if we get above 66k, I don't think we're going to see, prices below this point of control again, for example, for the time being. The other thing I really like about the way this has developed is the fact that we've seen this compression between 90-day and 30 and 7 days. So we're seeing this, really tight compression now between these rolling VWAPs. That to me is a sign that a decent move is brewing here. We saw similar back here, where we didn't really get the momentum I would have liked to have seen, but we saw this rolling VWAP compression. It's a classic, right? You get to the apex of a range, rolling VWAPs compress, and then you get the directional move. So I think we are pretty much at that point here again, right? We've seen this compression. This is going to lead to an expansion higher, in my opinion, right? I don't think we're likely to trade back into this area from here. I'm leaning higher. Not to say it can't happen, right? It's definitely plausible, but for now, the way things are looking, I think we're going to trade up. I'm wrong if we get below the POC here. I think I wouldn't want to see this high volume node lost now, right? I think that would be bad news. It would mean all the positioning that's built up around that level is then offside, and it's potentially going to lead to a break lower. So holding my long, soft invalidation around this POC, I don't want to see that lost. If we can shift above here and above 66k, then good news. I'm going to target 71.5, or these kind of this kind of area, previous composite highs, yearly and previous quarters VWAP, mindful of a possible rejection at the POC at 69k, right? I really want to see this imbalance tested at least, which potentially takes us into 69k. If we get some kind of failed attempt to break higher, right? So if we get something like this, maybe we take out these highs and then get back under 65, that's bad news, right? I don't want to see another failure above 65k. If we do that, we're going back to 61 at least. So leaning bullish, but obviously open to whatever possibilities the market might present. In terms of upside targets, where I'm targeting, these are theoretical targets, right? So yeah, I assume that we're going to attempt to traverse up to 71.5, and assume that the POC may act as resistance on the way up. But if we, for example, just trade into this area and then just balance and get some attempts to break higher which fail, that to me is a warning sign, right? I don't want to see us trade up, balance again, and then fail. That to me would signal that the move is probably over. So I really just want to see the market continues to trade up from this point on. Otherwise, once the move is over, it's over, and I think we're probably going to go and test somewhere around the lows again, right? So broadly speaking, I'm sort of long for the time being, potentially in towards the end of the month. I don't know how long this is going to take, and then I'd be looking for swing shorts from ideally this kind of region, and I'd like to see something similar to what we saw last time, right, where we were attempting to break back inside this value in this instance back from Q1 2025, right? We had these 1, 2, 3 big attempts to break higher, having formed local value here. All of these failed, and once we broke down from this and reaccepted in here, you knew the move was done. We then formed this tight compression, and we just continued to break down. So, I'd like to see something like that in terms of value established, attempts to break higher that fail. That to me would be a sign that bears are back in control, but I don't see those signs here at the moment. Obviously they could materialize. We do have a bit of an offer here, but it's mostly on the perp side. So I think that's it for BTC. I don't want to repeat myself anymore. Hopefully you followed all of that. That's pretty much it. So I'm leaning bullish. Obviously, just have to be reactive. Not really interested in low time frames too much, provided we stay above this point of control. I'm just going to hold my long from last Monday. Hope for the best, right? Retardmaxxing. Right, let's move on. ETH. I think Sol is more interesting, but let's look at ETH. So ETH, yeah, looks okay. It looks okay in terms of, value migrating higher. Trend structure looks pretty decent. 30 and 90 pointing up. 30 and 7 are pointing up. We're above the 90-day VWAP as well. Obviously not the best place to be getting long, given that we're trading at these value highs. And I think the ETH-BTC outperformance is done, quite honestly, for the time being. In terms of upside targets, very similar to BTC. This looks weird. This is, I think this is based on TPO. This is obviously volume profile. But in any case, we've attempted to break back inside, this composite 1975 failed once. So can we get above, that 1975 level? Then in that case, I'm just going to move this down just because it looks weird. I'll look at it again later. Right, so we have February, March value between sort of 1935 and 2150, right? So we know that we're compressing here at the edge of this value. Can we get a break into this value, reaccept above 1935? Then we can target up towards potentially, this 2150 kind of area, right? Yearly VWAP, previous year's value low again. We have potential resistance again at the POC, at previous quarter's VWAP. So, even if we do get inside here, we don't necessarily need to traverse value, but that's kind of what my expectation would be. So, again, I think the easy thing to do with ETH now is just to wait, right? If we can get decent displacement in here, ideally we get that retest of the shift around this 1930 area, right? You can see test, deviation inside, test. So can we get a shift inside and then a nice retest around 1930? That would be the ideal opportunity to get long targeting 2150. Obviously, there was an opportunity to get along here, given this failed break and reclaim of this this composite structure that we formed since mid-July. But I think if you're sidelined now, that's the way in, right? So can we get a break inside and then look to traverse this value, targeting these levels? Potentially then looking for a short, either if we fail there or if we put in something here, get a rejection here. But something around above 2K looks quite plausible for ETH to me at the moment. Then I would look for a potentially a move back into the lows around here, maybe even a move lower into 2025's low. That's pretty much sums up ETH on the sort of high time frame. I don't really have much else to add there. I think it's quite straightforward. I think Sol looks good for now. So what do we have? It's all very similar stuff, isn't it? So we have multiple months of consolidation here: February, March, April, May. We broke down from that in early June. This is a really easy short. We traded into this previous composite. We held here. We balanced for a bit, right? This is a pretty messy structure. I don't really love this structure, but it has been contextually relevant. So we shifted back above this. This is all held, right, on this retest, and we got this really tight consolidation for 11 days here. Another attempt to break back inside this value from June, which failed on Friday, and then I took a long here yesterday, took some off. Right, we're now into a bit of resistance here, but contextually, what's happened? Well, we've traded up out of this value. We've kind of flagged back into it, and this is all a retest at the moment and a failed break back inside this value. So to me, this is bullish. We do have obviously this naked point of control from this range at 85, which would be a sort of obvious upside target initially, and then potentially in towards these value highs again if we can keep going. But I think 85 is a logical target for now. We take out this high, and then we can reassess. But for me, it looks good, right? It looks good. I don't really understand why people are sort of so surprised that Solana is pumping, right? This is a bullish retest. We had a bullish breakout. It's a bullish chart. We're above all our rolling VWAPs again. Trend structure is not the best, right? That is for sure. The trend structure is actually hideous on this thing. Look at the way all these VWAPs are pointing. So yeah, we are trading against the high time frame trend. There's no doubt about that. Whoops. But certainly 85 looks very plausible from this leg, right? And I think at the moment I would say dips are probably for buying. Although if we fail, let me just get rid of all this markup. Let's zoom in here a bit. So we have this 4-day composite, right, which is a pretty tight range, kind of this high volume node, back from earlier in July, right? We got a nice retest of that a couple of weeks ago, traded back into this value. Now, are we going to hold above this, right? This is key, because if we do fail here, then you can argue that there's a case that we just chop it up more in this area. So I really want to see, ideally this sort of 76, 77 area hold. Otherwise, line in the sand now, I wouldn't really want to see it back below or back inside this sort of higher volume node. So any kind of retest of this area is okay. But really, I just want to see it continue to trade up, right? So if we come and test 74.50 for any reason, for example, we get capped here at previous month's VWAP and this fails to hold, potentially 74.50 is a good entry. A good area to look for a retest, but really I just want to see it trade out, right? Again, we're seeing that nice compression of these rolling VWAPs. So can this result in us moving into a sort of local uptrend for the time being? I would say that looks most likely. So 85 and then sort of this 90 area would be good upside targets, assuming I'm correct on that. So that's Solana. Pump has been doing really well. I mean, it's been in the cleanest uptrend in the whole market, really. So we spent a long time ranging here, had a breakdown, and then again failure here, another leg down, and this is where the trend started to shift, right? So 7, 30, 90 all crossing up, and we're now in this really nice uptrend, really good trend structure, reclaiming previous value above the developing years value high. So I'm just bullish on this until it starts to distribute. Basically, can we trade up to For example, the 90-day VWAP, I think it's just starting to get a bit of attention again, right? We had a nice range here that we formed from mid last week. Attempt to break down on Saturday. Pretty easy long here. Yeah, it looks good. I mean, it looks really good. So I mean, I was targeting at least this 9-day composite high. I'm looking at very old structures here, but potentially higher. If we just zoom out. So we have, a bit of imbalance here. Can we come and take out this high? These are all legitimate targets. Macro 236 is up here as well. Yeah, looks good. I think 29 to 30 area is a good upside target. There's potentially some historic VWAP resistance given how long we've been trading at these levels. There's probably some VWAP resistance that I haven't really factored into this discussion. Let's just take a quick look. We've probably got some naked levels. That's yearly, quarterly. Yeah, so we're at, actually, funny enough, we got a naked quarterly value high here, right? So from Q1 this year, we're trading at that naked quarterly value high, which is at 27.05. So that's why we're finding resistance here, right? And we traded into that level, having another attempt at it now. Probably need to pay attention to that 27.05. I will take a look at that after this stream, but I'm going to mark that level up and just put it on the chart, right? Just so I'm conscious of it. So this is Q1 value area high. So yeah, we are at some resistance here. If we do get a pullback, I think you'd be looking for monthly value high, yearly value high, and this old 9-day, very old 9-day composite low to hold, right? So this is from this consolidation back in from this time last year, right? So we want to see this value low hold. We can see it's been respected historically, right? So we held here, we broke below, we retested and sold off, traded into the POC. Obviously it is old, it has been traded through a lot, but it's still a point at which we have confluence between this and developing month, week and year value highs. So if we do get a pullback, there's your area for fresh bids. Otherwise looking for at least here and then potentially higher. So pump is probably the best looking chart right now in terms of the trend structure. A couple of other coins starting to move a bit. Pengu's potentially one we could just take a quick look at. I've got a couple of other things that I'm looking at as well. It's kind of illiquid and shit, but we have balanced here for multiple weeks. We have broken out of this balance, so any kind of retest around this area now ought to hold if we're going to continue to trade up. Obviously, price has found resistance at these areas historically, kind of doing the same thing again, right? So this is not a trending coin yet, right? We could see, again, a bit of compression here before it trades up, but has broken out of multiple weeks of value. So on that basis, we could potentially look for it to continue to trade higher. I think there are other coins which are kind of interesting coming into this week. I think Doge is looking, promising. Too early to say, and I don't really like to position too early into alts because there's just no point. You could sit through chop for far too long, but if we can reclaim this value and continue making higher lows, we can see the value traversal at least, which is a move worth capturing. So yeah, there's a few things going on. I think VVV is kind of interesting as well, but I'm going to leave it there for today. I think we've done enough. I'm optimistic that we see higher prices over the next couple of weeks. I'm unfortunately optimistic that we're pretty close to our macro bottom. I would have liked to see it go much lower, but obviously I just don't think we're going to see much huge returns from BTC going forward. I think it's becoming kind of disinteresting really from a sort of investment perspective at $60,000. Maybe we see like 180 next cycle. Okay, it's a 3x, but I think there are going to be loads of other assets that offer better returns in crypto even, right? I think I'm not hating on crypto as an asset class altogether. I just think Bitcoin as an investment opportunity is just not very interesting anymore. As a trading asset, fine, it's still edge there, but it's pretty boring, isn't it? Anyway, that's it. Catch you next time. Cheers for now. Maybe we'll talk more about TradFi next time because I do think that's probably taking a bit more of my attention these days. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Cheers.